Please take a seat. All rise for the President and Judges of the Caribbean Court of Justice. Please take your seats.
Good morning, everybody. Mr. Registrar, may you open the proceedings, please?
Caribbean Court of Justice, in its itinerant function, sitting in Guyana, has this 19th day of February called a special ceremonial sitting to mark and commemorate the retirement from the bench of the Caribbean Court of Justice, its First Lady Judge, the Honorable Madam Justice Bernard. I now turn you over to the Honorable President to continue the proceedings. Mr. President.
This sitting is intended to pay tribute. Thank you. This sitting is intended to pay tribute to and to celebrate the outstanding career of Madam Justice Bernard as she is about to enter into retirement. I am proud to have known her from the beginning of her legal career and to have seen her star rise gradually but surely to the top of the skies. I wish it could have stayed there forever. But time moves on for all of us. So today I say goodbye with a sad pleasure. Parting is indeed sweet sorrow. In paying tribute to my trusted and learned colleague, I intend to highlight aspects of her outstanding career, for time will not permit me to speak at length on this matter. And believe me, it is a subject which can occupy us for a further week or so of sittings in Guyana. Such is a stellar list of appointments, achievements, and recognitions attributable to Madam Justice Bernard. Therefore, I invite her to sit and to feast on your life as I trace a few highlights of her remarkable path. In paying tribute to Madam Justice Bernard, allow me to first lay the foundation upon which her remarkable career was built. Desiree Bernard was born on the 2nd of March, 1939. She decided to become a lawyer and received a Bachelor of Laws degree from the University of London in 1963. 1 year later, she qualified as a solicitor and had a career in private practice spanning the years 1964 to 1980. That was when she switched gears slightly, embarking upon a judicial career and making history in the process by being appointed the first female judge to the High Court of the Supreme Court of Guyana, and thus began her steady ascension through the ranks of the judiciary, picking up the honor of becoming the first female judge of the Court of Appeal in 1992, and ultimately the first female justice, not only in Guyana, but in the Caribbean, a mere 4 years later. Madam Justice Bernard shattered the proverbial glass ceiling once again in 2001 and 2005, becoming the first female Chancellor of the Judiciary of Guyana and the first female judge of the Caribbean Court of Justice. Now that the stage has been set, I can begin to explore the vast contribution made by this remarkable jurist. It is fitting that I should start with the last first, her years at the Caribbean Court of Justice, which marks the culmination of her life in the law. Justice Bernard is an embodiment of the intellectual caliber of Caribbean jurists and of the commitment of Guyana to the CCJ. She joins the ranks of other noted children of the Republic of Guyana who have made invaluable contributions to the CCJ, such as the late Justice Aubrey Bishop, who was a member of the Regional Judicial and Legal Services Commission. Justice Duke Pollard, who is a retired judge of the court. Professor Harold Lutchman, who has the distinction of being both a former member of the Board of Trustees for the CCJ Trust Fund and also a former member of the Regional Judicial and Legal Services Commission. And Mr. Oswald Barnes, who is a member of the Board of the Trust Fund. Throughout her tenure at the court, Madam Justice Bernard has demonstrated the value of the CCJ as a dispute resolution authority for regional integration, economic development in a rule-based community, exhibiting high standards of fairness and governance, opening up new avenues for ordinary people in our region to have a voice and to get justice at the highest tier of judicial authority. Her judgments have been instrumental in clarifying the law in Guyana particularly, and particularly in the areas of land law, civil procedure, commercial litigation, and public law. I can just pick out 4 of the more notable cases in this regard. There was a case of Alfred Chung against AIC Battery and Automotive Services Company Limited, which explained the true import of Order 12 of the rules of the High Court of Guyana. Then there was the Guyana Furniture Manufacturing and Robert Ramcharan and the National Bank of Industry and Commerce, clarifying the rights and responsibilities of a receiver of a company in liquidation. There's the case of Lakram Bishnov and Ramanand Shupasad and Rajwati Bisnov, providing guidance on the principles relating to the acquisition of prescriptive title to land under the Guyana Title to Land Prescription and Limitation Act, Capital 60. North and the Attorney General of Guyana and the Public Service Commission, setting out the law governing applications for special leave to appeal to the Caribbean Court of Justice. But one cannot speak of Madam Justice Bernard without mentioning her impact as a Caribbean woman. In paying honor to her at the recent Casual Conference, Tracy Robinson described her as a pioneer woman judge, generous and plain-speaking, deeply committed to nation and region, yet an avowed internationalist and a long-time defender of women's rights. And that's a description with which I wholeheartedly agree. In many respects, Justice Bernard has been a trailblazer, breaking barriers for women in Guyana, the Caribbean, and the world. Some of the many firsts are: she was appointed the first female to sit on the disciplinary committee of the West Indies Cricket Board. She was the first female judge of the Caribbean Court of Justice. She was the first chancellor, first female chancellor and head of judiciary in Guyana. and president of its Court of Appeal. She had been the first female judge of the Supreme Court of Guyana. In fact, the first woman to hold such a position in the Caribbean. She was the first and only female president of the Organization of Commonwealth Caribbean Bar Associations. She has also displayed an unwavering commitment to the advancement of women and children's rights in the Caribbean region. Her work at the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women from 1982 to 1998 stands as a testament in this regard. She has spoken extensively on the issue of advancing the cause of Caribbean women and children, examining crucial themes such as the relationship between human rights and the rights of women and children, the impact of international human rights treaties on the rights of women and children within the family, the issue of gender equality and the law, the role of the judiciary in promoting gender equality, advances made on gender equality and women's human rights in the Caribbean region. In recognition of her steadfast work in support of the rights of women and children, she was bestowed with the honor of the CARICOM Triennial Award for Women in 2005. A momentous achievement, which I'm sure holds a treasured place in her heart. Having looked at her career as a jurist, I must say a word or two about her character. In describing Justice Bernard, two words automatically spring to mind: excellence and integrity. One of the tenets that has been a guide is a constant search for excellence in all her endeavors. As a student, a legal practitioner, a judge, a judicial administrator, she has always brought her best to bear. Her service to the profession and the public, not only nationally and regionally, but also worldwide, has been nothing short of service par excellence. Her commitment to excellence is rivaled only by her own deep-rooted adherence to the value of integrity. From her earliest and humble beginnings in this community, throughout her various elevations to a seat on the apex court in the Caribbean region, she has been a devout adherent to the spiritual mandates of her religious roots. And even as she closes the door on a service to the CCJ, she remains the Chancellor of the Church. Indeed, faithful servants never retire. You can retire from your career, but you'll never retire from serving your God. We live in a time when the Caribbean region, and indeed the entire world, at times seems adrift from its moral center. And this is epitomized in Yeats's Second Coming, and I quote, "Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. May anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity." Unquote. However, I am by nature an eternal optimist. In turning the tide of societal breakdown, I urge us all to follow Justice Bernard's example. We should pay tribute to her and celebrate her achievements, not merely in word, but also indeed by making excellence and integrity the hallmark of all our future endeavors. Speaking of future endeavors, I must observe that for a person so vibrant and public-spirited, I know that this retirement cannot be the end of Justice Bernard's career. I am expecting her to continue serving the region in key areas. She has just completed a fellowship, an academic fellowship at the Inns of Court in the area of alternate dispute resolution. And I'm sure that her keen interest in this subject augurs well for the future development of both the CSME, the Caribbean Single Market and Economy, and the institutional capacity for Caribbean judiciaries. I have no doubt that we will all learn of her impact in the area of ADR in short order. I fully expect Justice Bernard to remark, as did Sandra Day O'Connor, the first female justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. Sooner or later, she will need to retire from retirement. As I conclude, on behalf of my colleagues on the Caribbean Court of Justice and all the staff of the court, and I would dare say, on behalf of the Caribbean community, we offer heartfelt thanks to Madam Justice Desiree Bernard for her immense contribution to the Caribbean region, which I have endeavored to describe but briefly here today. I wish her health, I wish her happiness, I wish her peace, and I wish her love in her future sojourns. Thank you.
I now call upon the Honorable Mr. Justice Carl Singh, Chancellor of the Judiciary of Guyana. Sir?
We meet this morning on the eve of the retirement from the bench of the Caribbean Court of Justice of a distinguished Caribbean jurist. And I could not let the occasion pass without specifically mentioning that this jurist is also a distinguished Guyanese of whom we are exceptionally proud. I am referring to today's honorand, Her Honor Justice Desiree Bernard. From very early after first meeting Justice Bernard, I became aware that one of Her Honor's striking qualities was her essential humanity and deep understanding of people. These qualities are reflected in Her Honor's attitude to people of all walks of life. On a personal note, I will be forever in Her Honor's debt for her continuous encouragement and support as my own judicial career progressed. But what is there that is striking about Justice Bernard in her role as a judge? A quality strikingly evident in Her Honor's judgments is a conscious effort to be just and fair to all who appeared before her. In the first book of the Institutes of Justinian is to be found a classic definition of the word justice. It reads, quote, "Justice is the constant and perpetual wish to render everyone his due," end of quote. Fairness, as we know, is one of the principles which underpins the concept of due process and was an important consideration in Her Honor's decision in Kemp Roberts versus the Attorney General, which is reported in the 1994 15 West Indian Reports at page 273. Here, the appellant had been dismissed from the police force without being given an opportunity to reply to the allegations made against him. Of this circumstance, Her Honor observed, quote, "The principles of natural justice cannot be circumvented by utilizing a shortcut in achieving the desired objective of removing an employee from office. The errant constable, a public servant, is entitled to be heard before any disciplinary action is taken against him, especially if such action is likely to affect his ability to earn a living in the future and any financial entitlements. Dismissal is not an option to be exercised lightly by those who exercise disciplinary control over others." End of quote. The same insistence on a fair procedure is also evident in Her Honor's decision in Ray Hanuman, 1999, 65 West Indian Reports at page 157. Here, the Minister of Health requested the Guyana Medical Council to submit the names of medical practitioners suitable for appointment to the Medical Council. 6 names were submitted. The minister arbitrarily rejected 2 and substituted 2 persons independently. The Medical Council requested of the minister the reasons which influenced his decision to reject the 2 proposed persons. The minister contended that he was under no obligation to provide reasons. In disagreeing with the minister's contention, Justice Bernard explained, quote, "In the absence of specific legislation obliging a public functionary to give reasons for a decision, many cases indicate that the modern trend is towards openness, fairness, and transparency, regardless of the right that is infringed. The overall objective is fairness based on the long-established principles of natural justice." End of quote. The late distinguished senior counsel Clarence Hughes, in an address to a special full court sitting to welcome Justice Bernard and myself to the offices of Chancellor and Chief Justice respectively, commented on Justice Bernard's sense of fairness, and in addressing Her Honor directly said, quote, "And Your Honor ensures that this principle is observed with such overwhelming and consummate ease that many a litigant does not know when he is losing a case." End of quote. Justice Bernard's legal career, in a sense, blazed the path for women in Guyana and the wider Caribbean who endeavored to pursue a career in law. It marked a far shift away from the status of women historically who aspired to judicial office. In a 13th century work by Andrew Horn titled "The Mirror of Justices," the author wrote, quote, "Women, serfs, lepers, lunatics, and those excommunicated by a bishop were not eligible for appointment to the bench." End of quote. But of men, a judge of the American Supreme Court, His Honor Justice Jackson, once observed that, quote, "Men who make their way to the bench sometimes exhibit vanity, irascibility, narrowness, arrogance, and other weakness to which human flesh is heir." End of quote. While we understand that the Regional Judicial and Legal Services Commission wished to have a female judge on the bench of the Caribbean Court of Justice, perhaps to achieve a measure of gender recognition, the choice of Her Honor Desiree Bernard was one of a judge with appropriate judicial temperament, a judge of considerable learning and experience, and a judge who, in exemplary fashion, has demonstrated discipline and decorum, and who is always courteous, polite, and extremely personable. For Her Honor Justice Bernard, her legal career and her attainment of a seat on the bench of the Caribbean Court of Justice is eloquent testimony to the heights achievable by women in the legal profession who commit themselves to the disciplined and dedicated study of law. Justice Bernard has had a distinguished and illuminating legal career. It is evident that her life has been one of significant achievements, fulfillment, and success. A University of Guyana student, writing in the letter columns of a local newspaper yesterday, captured the essence of Her Honor's life when he wrote, quote, "Justice Bernard's story embodies that unyielding hope of a better Guyana. It is one that reminds us that with hard work, discipline, dignity, and determination, every boy and girl can reach for the stars." End of quote. We have with us this morning Chief Justice Kenneth Benjamin, the Honorable Chief Justice of Belize, and I would like to thank him for his ready acceptance of my invitation to be with us here today. I would also like to associate my colleagues, the Chief Justices of the Commonwealth Caribbean, and the President of the Supreme Court of Suriname, who for varying reasons are unable to be here with us with the comments earlier made by me. Before concluding, I only wish to say that I am well aware that Her Honor Justice Bernard has been a fierce advocate for the independence of the judiciary. In the local context, there seems to be a widely held perception that the independence of the judiciary relates only to the adjudicatory role of a judge. But I say that financial independence of the Supreme Court reinforces the constitutional intent of judicial independence. Executive control of monies approved by the National Assembly for the Supreme Court results in a dilution of the quality of independence to which the judiciary is constitutionally entitled. It goes without saying that such financial independence must be accompanied by the maintenance of the highest standards of transparency and accountability. This is what is expected to give effect to meaningful judicial independence, and to which effect must be given. To Her Honor Justice Bernard, I say, Guyana, indeed the Caribbean, notes your outstanding achievements in your long and distinguished judicial career. On my own behalf, and on behalf of His Honor the Acting Chief Justice and judges of the Supreme Court of Guyana and the members of the magistracy, I wish Your Honor continued good health and happiness in the years ahead.
I now call upon the Honorable Mohabir Anil Nanlal, MP, Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs of Guyana. Would you approach the podium, please, sir?
May it please Your Honors, on behalf of His Excellency the President of the Republic of Guyana, on behalf of the government of the people of Guyana, it is indeed a privilege and a most humbling experience for me being afforded an opportunity to pay tribute to one of the Caribbean most distinguished daughters the Honorable Madam Desiree Bernard, a distinguished jurist, a professional woman par excellence, and indeed a Caribbean icon. It is an impossibility for anyone to endeavor to properly recognize the contributions, the achievements, the accomplishments of a person of the caliber of Justice Bernard in the circumstances and in the time available. And it is not my endeavor to do so, except to recognize that Her Honor has indeed been a trailblazer, as the President of the Caribbean Court of Justice just stated. Her Honor was, of course, the first High Court judge female High Court judge of Guyana, and indeed, I think, the entire Caribbean. Her Honor was the first Court of Appeal female judge of Guyana and the Caribbean. Her Honor was the first female Chief Justice of Guyana and the first female Chief Justice in the Caribbean. Her Honor was the first female Chancellor of the Judiciary of Guyana and indeed the first female head of the judiciary of any Caribbean country. And Her Honor was also, of course, the first female judge of the Caribbean Court of Justice. At every stage of the hierarchical structure of the judiciary at which Her Honor presided, I don't think anyone can doubt that her contribution, her written judgments, are an exhibition of legal scholarship as well as an appreciable exhibition of pragmatism, so often absent but so much needed in our jurisprudence. Speaking from my personal experience, what I remember most about Her Honor is that maternal vibe and sense that one gets, especially the young practitioners, when one appeared before Her Honor. I recall as a young practitioner, I filed a constitutional challenge to a judgment rendered by a puisne judge. Justice Bernard was then Chancellor of the Judiciary, and she met me at a social event, called me aside and said, "Why have you filed that constitutional challenge? Come to the court, file an appeal to the Court of Appeal. I believe that a miscarriage of justice occurred. It is manifest, and that can be corrected at the Court of Appeal." And of course, she imparted to me certain guiding and words of guidance. That is the touch to which I make reference, which I remember Her Honor for, and I have no doubt that the many practitioners who are here, especially the young practitioners, can relate to several instances where Her Honor unrobed herself as a judge and exercised in a special jurisdiction to bring matters to an end. Madam Bernard has left a legacy for us all to emulate. It is indeed an uphill task to do so. As we bid farewell to Her Honor, as the curtains fall on this stage of her career, we hope that a new chapter will soon begin. where the people of Guyana, and indeed the people of the entire region, will continue to benefit from her wisdom, from her knowledge, from her scholarship, and from all the great qualities we have heard adumbrated this morning. As a Guyanese, I am proud of Justice Bernard, and I believe that Guyana, obviously, is proud of Justice Bernard. We hope that she remains with us, and we hope that she continues to serve in other capacities, so that the people of Guyana, so that the people of the Caribbean will continue to benefit from her education, from her experience, and from her scholarship. Thank you very much, Your Honors.
I now call upon His Excellency, Mr. Erwin LaRoche, Secretary General of CARICOM.
The Right Honorable Sir Dennis Byron, President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Honorable Madam Justice Desiree Bernard and other justices of the Caribbean Court of Justice. I am privileged to speak on behalf of the Caribbean community at this ceremony honoring Madam Justice Bernard, one of the inaugural judges and the first female judge of the Caribbean Court of Justice. Her appointment to that high office was a proud moment for us in the community, given that Justice Bernard was the recipient of the 8th CARICOM Triennial Award for Women in 2005, evidence that she has distinguished herself in numerous areas, 2 of which are of particular significance to the Caribbean community. Madam Justice Bernard has shown what women can achieve in a not-so-level playing field, and she has set an awe-inspiring example for women to follow. Regionally, she was the founding secretary of the Caribbean Women's Association, a member and chair of the Caribbean Steering Committee for Women's Affairs, later established as the Women and Development Unit of University of West Indies. Internationally, she served as both rapporteur and chair of the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. Madam Justice Bernard has consistently showed her concern for women across the region and has worked tirelessly in calling for the cessation of violence against women and for their equal treatment in all facets of life, be it in their homes, their workplaces, and in marriages and other unions. Madam Justice Bernard has consistently reminded us of the Charter of Civil Society, as she put it, and I quote, an oft-forgotten regional instrument signed and adopted by resolution of all member states of the Caribbean community, end quote. Article 12 of the Charter addresses the rights of women, which include the right to legal protection, including just and effective remedies against domestic violence, sexual abuse, and sexual harassment. Madam Justice, we as a region recommit to these principles, which remain relevant today as we continue to fight the scourge of violence against women. Her contribution to the development of jurisprudence in Guyana and the Caribbean was by no means limited by her contributions in the social arena. There are several notable principles of law and procedure clarified in judgments rendered by Madam Justice Bernard in Guyana, which I am sure are well known to the distinguished members of the bench and bar present here today. Madam Justice Bernard has also demonstrated in judgments in Guyana her expertise in the area of Roman Dutch law as part of the civil law tradition received by our CARICOM member states of Guyana, Haiti, and Suriname. This has no doubt been an immense value to the Caribbean Court of Justice, as in its appellate jurisdiction, it is the highest court for Guyana. Her contribution to the development of Caribbean jurisprudence has continued in the realm of community law, as she has sat on the panel for pioneering cases in the original jurisdiction of the CCJ, such as Trinidad Cement Limited versus the Caribbean Community. Justice Bernard and the other honorable justices of the CCJ reviewed the decision-making process of the Council for Trade and Economic Development and the Secretary General in relation to the Common External Tariff against the requirements of the constituent legal instrument of CARICOM, the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. The ruling in that matter emphasized the nature of the community as a rules-based system and has resulted in the community and the Secretariat adopting new and more transparent procedures in respect of the common external tariff. Madam Justice Bernard was also on the panel in the recent seminal case of Shandik Mairi and the state of Barbados and the state of Jamaica, where the court's ruling spoke to the right of entry by CARICOM nationals to another CARICOM state and the nature of community law. The judgment in this case has been studied most assiduously since its delivery in October 2013 by governments, officials, academics, the international community, and most importantly, community nationals. It confirms the legal status of decisions of the conference and other organs of the community as being secondary legislation, part of community law. This judgment has far-reaching implications for the decision-making process in CARICOM, where it is now clearly recognized that the organs of the community can take decisions pursuant to the authority and procedure set out in the revised treaty, and such decisions can be binding and enforceable at the community level. This ruling provides guidance to the ongoing reform of the community, particularly in respect of decision-making, and the prerequisite steps for decisions which may create obligations or rights, confer benefits, or otherwise make community law. The guidance provided by the court is being studied carefully as this judgment has etched its permanent place in the annals of the Caribbean community. Mr. President, eminent jurists, the intellectual depth of Madam Justice Bernard reflects the strength of the judicial competence of the Caribbean Court of Justice. There can be no doubt that the court's ability to render well-thought-out and reasoned judgments can stand the scrutiny of its most ardent detractors. The CCJ is an integral edifice in the regional architecture as designed within the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. But arguably, even more important, the court in both its jurisdictions represents the essence of our independence and sovereignty, and is essential to the progress of the integration movement. It is an institution that has proven its worth, and I look forward to the day when all our member states accede to both its jurisdictions. What better tribute can we pay to Madam Justice Bernard? The work of Madam Justice Bernard has enriched the legal and social fabric of our community, and for that we express our most heartfelt gratitude. The wealth of knowledge and expertise which reside in you, Madam Justice, I am certain will not be lost to the region, as I wish you all the best in this new phase of your life. I give you God's blessings.
Chang and the members of the judiciary of my native Guyana at all levels of the judiciary, members of the legal profession, and I again depart from the script to recognize some outstanding members of the legal profession of my generation. I refer to Ashton Chase, Ralph Ramkaran, Robin Stobie, and Edward Lucku, and others. And I also salute those members of the Guyana judiciary who have retired after distinguished service. I bring you greetings from the Chief Justice Michael Ramudi Bedi of the Supreme Court of Swaziland, who are here in spirit. Mr. President, I consider it a distinct honor that my wife and I have been invited to this special sitting of the CCJ by President Byron and Chancellor Carl Singh, but more so by the personal request made to us by Justice Desiree Patricia Bernard that we should share with her the celebration of what I have no doubt is only a milestone of her still evolving career in the law, which has been truly breathtaking in its scope and inspiring thrust at the spearhead of the justifiable quest of women for equality of opportunity. I wholeheartedly endorse all the laudatory sentiments which have already been expressed and those which will be expressed after I speak, and therefore there's no need for me to repeat some of the details of Justice Bernard's outstanding career. And so I will confine myself briefly to my own testimonial of the manner in which Desiree, and I'm sure that Justice Bernard will allow me that indulgence of informality. I'm sure that Desiree has impacted on my own life and those of my daughter Susan and my son Alex, who are doing their best, as I did, to emulate her shining example. My relation with Desiree began in 1958 or thereabout, when I joined a tutorial class conducted by the late Frederick Rudolph Wills at the home of the Edwards family in Norton Street, Georgetown. And I was happily pleased this morning to see that L.V. Overton Edwards, who herself became a lawyer, was present for this ceremony this morning. The class met on Sunday mornings from about 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. or so. And Fred Wills taught all the intermediate LLB subjects and the Part 1 subjects within that short space of time. But after the third Sunday, in a distinguished company which, of course, included Desiree and Duke Pollard and L.V. Overton Edwards and Norma Walterine Jackman and Una Levius, I came to the conclusion that I simply could not keep up, and therefore I decided to drop out of that class. Before I did so, however, I thought it prudent to consult Desiree, who, in her typically serene manner, had clearly established herself as our student leader. She blushes, but so she was. Desiree persuaded me to continue, lent me all of her notes, which I copied to the letter, and assumed the role of mentor to me, which continues right up to this very moment. It was that act of kindness and perception which resulted in my joining the late Mohammed Ayub Ali Makdoum on the London University External LLB Pass List for Guyana in 1962. Desiree was my first female mentor, and let me here to say, my chronological junior by many years, nevertheless my mentor. She was a distinguished member of my college of mentors, which in addition to the late F.R. Wills, included the late Sir Lionel Luckow, Joseph Oscar Fitzclarence Haynes, Aubrey Fitzronald Bishop, Sir Joachim Gonzalez Sabola, those of the ones who have passed on, together with Rex Herbert McKay, Sir Dennis Byron, you two are one of my members, my mentor, Sir Dennis, and Dame Joan Sawyer of the Bahamas, who are happily still with us. Justice Bernard brought a quiet dignity to the judicial bench. Hers was a user-friendly court. She maintained control without intimidating anyone. Hers was a model worthy of emulation. I have also experienced at firsthand Justice Bernard's caring competence as a practicing solicitor. When a divorce appeared to be the only sensible course to adopt in a certain marriage, she, together with Horace Passad, handled the ancillary matters with admirable dexterity. And so before long, a settlement had been reached with counsel on the other side, which was fair to all parties concerned. I was in a unique position to observe Justice Bernard's electability when she first stood for the presidency of the Organization of Commonwealth Caribbean Bar Associations in, I believe it was Ocho Rios, Jamaica, the Turtle Beach Towers. I became a self-appointed campaign manager, and Arthur Alexander was my deputy, but we had an excellent candidate. Her opponent was an entrenched male who was favored to win handily. But such was the power of Desiree's persuasiveness that she carried the day by a comfortable margin. And on top of that, before the attendees of that meeting departed for their respective homes, the losing candidate had become a committed convert. The English-speaking Caribbean has produced a long line of highly distinguished sons and daughters. It has produced Nobel laureates. It has also produced Justice Desiree Patricia Bernard. I verily believe that hers and ours are unique achievements in the international community. We rightly salute our sporting heroes and entertainers, but the time has surely come for us to salute our intellectuals and our judges with the same enthusiasm. That is why I salute Justice Desiree Patricia Bernard as a woman of history. She has made us proud both within and beyond this region. That is why I also commend all those who have made this special sitting possible. And that is why I challenge the present and the future generations of lawyers, both in Guyana and in the region, to rise to the levels to which Justice Bernard has soared, and then to reach up to the heights which lie above. Finally, my dear Desiree, on my own behalf and on behalf of my extended family, I wish that your continuing career be long and rewarding, and your future life full and enriching.
I now call upon Mr. Oswald Barnes, member of the CCJ Trust Fund.
Your Honors, it's indeed a privilege for me to address you on behalf of the Board of Trustees at this special sitting in honor of Madam Justice Desiree Bernard. I have chosen to tell you about what the Board of Trustees does in order to ensure that the judges, Justice Desiree Bernard and others, are not distracted by matters pertaining to finance from doing what they are required to do. As a means of ensuring that the Caribbean Court of Justice was seen as being free from any government influence, the participating member governments agreed to the establishment of a trust fund to promote and safeguard the independence, integrity, and credibility of the court. As stated in the revised agreement, the fund was established to provide the resources necessary to finance the biennial capital and operating budget of the fund and the commission of the court and the commission in perpetuity. The fund was established in the sum of $100 million US. It is governed by a board of trustees, 9 in number, being themselves holders or nominees of designated positions in the following regional institutions: Secretary General of the Caribbean Community, the Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, the President of the Insurance Association of the Caribbean, the Chairman of the Association of Indigenous Banks of the Caribbean, the President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of the Caribbean, the President of the Organization of Commonwealth Caribbean Bar Associations, the Chairman of the Conference of Heads of Judiciary of Member States of the Caribbean Community, the President of the Caribbean Association of Industry and Commerce, and the President of the Caribbean Congress of Labor. The fund is headquartered in Trinidad, and it is staffed by a complement of 6, headed by an executive officer. The resources of the fund were provided by participating member states in a relative proportion to their contribution to the Caribbean community. These resources were raised by the Caribbean Development Bank on the international capital market and loaned to participating governments to meet their allocated share of the contribution. The resources were transferred to the trust fund in April 2005 upon inauguration of the court. The government of the Bahamas, though not now a participating member, has since 2006 been making annual contributions of approximately $1.018 million US. These payments are scheduled to cease in 2014, when the government would have made payment of its appropriate share were it to decide to become a member of the court. The resources of the fund are invested on the international capital market based on the advice of an investment advisor who was selected through a competitive process. A Finance and Investment Committee, which is a subcommittee of the Board of Trustees, has direct responsibility for overseeing investments. The full board approves all investment decisions. Despite the global financial crisis of 2008-2009, the fund has provided capital and recurrent resources to the Court, Regional Judicial and Legal Services Commission, and the Trust Fund over the period 2005 to 2013, and now stands at just over $100 million US. An audit committee, another subcommittee of the board, oversees the fund's financial reporting process, the internal control and audit process. The fund's auditors are Ernst Young of Trinidad and Tobago. Financial statements for all years from commencement to 31st December 2012 have been audited and circulated to participating heads of government. The fund has always received clean or unqualified audit opinions. From the foregoing, you would have noted that the fund is well managed and has so far met its purpose admirably. Madam Justice Desiree Bernard, as she retires and goes to another phase in her life, I want to assure her personally on behalf of the Trust Fund that we are well placed to pay our pensions. On this occasion, on behalf of the Board of Trustees, I wish Justice Madam Desiree Bernard pleasant days ahead as she embarks on a new leg of what has been so far, and I hope will continue to be, an illustrious life. I thank you.
I now call upon Professor Harold Lutchman, representing the Regional Judicial and Legal Service Commission.
Thank you, President, and all the members of the bench, honorable bench of the Caribbean Court of Justice. I consider it an honor and privilege to be nominated by the RGLSC with a precise stipulation that you are to speak for 5 minutes to address this honorable court on this auspicious occasion. I have long had great admiration and respect for Her Honor Justice Desiree Bernard, a daughter in whom there are good reasons for Guyana to be well pleased. From what has been said by previous presenters so far, with which I concur, there is no doubt in my mind that Justice Bernard deserves to be described, and somebody preempted this, as an icon in the jurisdiction of Guyana since her membership of the CCJ. And since our membership of the CCJ, this description should be extended to the Caribbean and even further afield. At the same time, the sum of her contribution to public service encompasses much more than those emanating from her association with the law. Exemplified in the impressive list of honors and recognitions conferred and extended to her in appreciation of the range of her service to society in general. We are all aware that in the anxiety to invent a viable and more relevant court in substitution for the London-based Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, efforts in this direction ultimately resulted in structures which have attracted wide interest and admiration. There also had to be general awareness that even finely structured and fashioned organizations have to be properly staffed in order to produce desired results. Hence the importance which is placed on the recruitment of skilled and competent human resources, which applies equally to the CCJ and its agencies, an important function of the RGLSC. Specific to the CCJ is my perception that there was an early recognition that justice could only be dispensed fairly by judges of learning, independence, and unquestioned integrity. The approach of advertising to the world at large for members of the court was fruitful of results. It is my view that Justice Bernard's legal and judicial skills, which were primarily honed in the country of her birth, as we have heard, favored her recruitment along with the first set of judges to occupy the bench of the CCJ. As Her Honor had progressively ascended the judicial hierarchy, eventually reaching the pinnacle in Guyana, her suitability and capacity for higher judicial appointment were clearly evident in justification of her upward mobility. As one who has paid close attention to Her Honor's professional development and progression because of her ubiquitous involvement in public service activities, she was, to me, far from being a judicial recluse, especially as I recall her invaluable contribution to the University of Guyana in its formative and challenging years as a member of its then Board of Governors, which I was fortunate to witness firsthand. The time has arrived for Honorable Justice Bernard to retire from the service of your Honorable Court. Although her relationship with the court may be defined as one of service, I believe that she may well personally conceptualize it also as a learning process and a means through which her own knowledge and skills were enhanced, resulting in this distinct possibility that greater demands for her service may well arise from diverse sources in the not-too-distant future. But Her Honor is well equipped to manage such a situation. I'm pleased, on behalf of the RGLSC, of which our President is Chairman, and on my own behalf, to congratulate and thank Her Honor for her service to the CCJ and to extend best wishes for safety and good health as she defines and enjoys her retirement. Thank you.
I now call upon Mr. Ronald Birchsmith, President of the Guyana Bar Association.
May it please your honors, it gives me great pleasure to stand here before you to address you on this solemn occasion on my own behalf and on behalf of the Guyana Bar Association. In my efforts to prepare for today's presentation, I managed to obtain from one of my colleagues a copy of Her Honor's CV. As I started reading, and this was the short version, as I started reading and I got to the third page, it's set out in chronological order, and I reached the year that I was born. I realized very quickly that there was very little that I knew firsthand that I could present to such an august body about Her Honor. In fact, there was absolutely nothing because I had never had the privilege of appearing before Her Honor Justice Bernard. But in speaking to more of my colleagues, I learned that in her time at the bench, she was slightly intimidating, dealt with lawyers and the public in a firm but extraordinarily polite and dignified manner. Such were her qualities that it struck me that the only time I had had a similar experience was once when, as a young man, I took a brief from a man who had been convicted of malicious damage to property in the CARICOM Magistrates Court. And he asked me to appeal, and I read the magistrate's notes of evidence. And I saw that at one stage the magistrate had described his actions as throwing the bicycle at the side of the road, and at another stage she referred to it being thrown in the middle of the road. And it struck me that, in my youthful exuberance, I had found a thread that would unravel all her findings of fact. And so I advanced my case to the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court Court of Appeal. And having listened